4,000 years of bloodshed, 4,000 years of fire. The world looks at the Middle East and sees a modern dispute, a geopolitical conflict over land, a battle for borders. They are wrong. If this were just about borders, it would have been solved centuries ago. Every generation, world leaders gather. They draw new maps. They sign historic treaties. They shake hands for the cameras. The ink dries. The world applauds. And every single time, it ends in fire. The treaties burn. The missiles fly. The blood runs into the sand. Why does every ceasefire collapse? Because the world is blind. They are trying to solve a spiritual collision with a political pen. You cannot legislate an ancient curse. You cannot negotiate with a theological fracture. The true origin of this hatred is not found in a United Nations resolution. It is buried deep in the book of Genesis. It is an ancient, unresolved trauma, a family wound that mutated into a holy war, a single, catastrophic decision that redrew the map of the earth. Today, we will reveal the true biblical origin of this endless war. We will expose why human politics can never fix it, and we will show you exactly how the ancient texts say it is going to end. To understand why Jews and Arabs are locked in perpetual combat, you must go back to the exact moment the fuse was lit. The fuse was not a weapon. It was a promise. The year is 2100 BC. The ancient city of Ur, southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. This is not a primitive wasteland. This is the zenith of human civilization. Towering ziggurats piece the sky. Astrologers map the stars. The air is thick with the smoke of pagan altars. Ancient midrashic traditions tell us this was a world drowning in idolatry, a society built on the worship of the moon and the labor of slaves. In the center of this polytheistic empire, the creator of the universe speaks to one man, Abram. The terms of the covenant are staggering. God makes a promise. He promises Abram a territory, the land of Canaan, a vast expanse stretching from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. God promises him blood, descendants as numerous as the stars in the black sky, offspring like the grains of sand on the seashore. And God promises him a legacy. Through his seed, every nation on earth will be blessed. Genesis 12 and 15 record the exact terms, but words in the ancient world are cheap. A promise requires proof. A covenant requires blood. The ceremony that sealed this pact was unlike any ordinary human contract. It was visceral. It was brutal. In Genesis 15, God issues a chilling command. Abram is told to bring specific animals: a heifer, a goat, a ram, a dove, a young pigeon. Abram obeys. He slaughters the larger animals. He cuts their bodies perfectly in half. He arranges the bleeding halves opposite each other on the dirt. The blood pools in the Mesopotamian dust. In the ancient Near East, this was a legally binding ritual, a suzerain vassal treaty. Both parties would walk through the path of blood. They would stand between the severed flesh. The meaning was absolute. May I be torn apart like these animals if I break this oath. Abram prepares the altar. He waits. The sun begins to set. Birds of prey descend on the carcasses. Abram fights them off. The tension builds. Then the sun vanishes. Abram does not walk. Instead, a supernatural paralysis takes him. He falls into a deep, unnatural sleep. The book of Genesis calls it a thick and dreadful darkness. The ancient book of Jubilees describes it as a terror from the unseen realm, a suffocating spiritual weight crushing his chest. Abram cannot move. He can only watch. Out of the pitch-black void, a manifestation appears. A smoking firepot, a blazing torch, the pure, terrifying presence of God Himself. The fire glides forward. It moves through the path of blood. It passes between the severed, lifeless flesh. God walks. God walks alone. Abram remains paralyzed in the dark. This is the turning point of human history. This was not a partnership. This was not a negotiation. This was a unilateral, unconditional divine commitment. By walking alone, God was taking the entire curse upon Himself. He was staking His own name. He was staking His own eternal existence on the promise. The covenant was sealed. The land was granted. The destiny of the world was locked in place. There was only one problem. Abram had no son. His wife, Sarai, was barren. In the ancient Near East, an heirless patriarch was not merely unfortunate, he was cursed. Without a son, a man's name vanished from the tribal records. His land reverted to strangers. His wealth bled into the hands of distant relatives. His legacy evaporated, like water on hot desert stone. Mesopotamia was an honor-shame culture. Barrenness was not a private grief, it was a public disgrace. It followed the family like a shadow. Every passing month was a silent, grinding humiliation. It corroded Abram's standing in the city gates. It eroded his confidence in the God of the firepot. God did not explain the delay. He gave no timeline. He provided no updates. He demanded only one thing: trust. Abram waited. He waited through his 60s. He waited through his 70s. He waited into his 80s. 25 years of silence. 25 years of watching other men's sons grow into warriors. 25 years of listening to the deafening quiet of his own tent. He held a promise that produced nothing visible, nothing tangible, nothing he could show the skeptics. The silence of God is heavy. It breaks the human mind. It bends the human will. At 86 years old, the patience shattered. The psychological weight became unbearable. Sarai came to him with a proposal. It was not a rebellion, not in her eyes. It was a legally recognized practice. Archaeologists have unearthed the clay tablets of Nutsi in modern-day northern Iraq. These ancient texts reveal the strict laws of the era. A barren wife could offer her servant as a surrogate. She could claim the child as her own legal heir. Sarai was not inventing a sin. She was following the culture. She offered her Egyptian servant, a young woman named Hagar. The logic was cold. It was rational. If God would not provide the miracle, they would manufacture one. They would help God keep His word. Abram agreed. It was a single decision, driven by exhaustion, driven by cultural pressure, driven by the unbearable agony of divine silence. Abram attempted to produce a heavenly promise through earthly effort. They thought they were just securing a bloodline. They had no idea they were giving birth to a civilization that would bring their actual descendants to the brink of annihilation. Hagar conceived, almost immediately. The moment the seed took root, the household fractured. The power dynamic violently shifted. Hagar, now carrying the heir of the most powerful warlord in the region, looked at Sarai, and she smiled. The text says she looked upon her mistress with open contempt. The servant who once lowered her eyes now held the ultimate prize, a child in her womb. Sarai was humiliated. The surrogate she offered had become her tormentor. Sarai turned on Hagar. The cruelty was severe. The psychological abuse was relentless. The pregnant servant broke. She fled into the unforgiving desert alone. She ran toward Egypt, toward the ancient trade route of Shur. But she was not alone. An angel of the Lord found her, by a spring of water in the wasteland. He told her to return, to submit. But he also delivered a prophecy, a chilling decree over the unborn child. Genesis 16:12 records the exact words. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. Read those words again. A wild donkey of a man, untamable, fierce, roaming the desolate places, his hand against everyone, everyone's hand against him. That single verse, spoken over a pregnant slave in the desert sand, reads like a modern headline. It is the absolute blueprint of Middle Eastern history. The boy would be named Ishmael, meaning God hears. Hagar returned. Ishmael was born. Abram was 86. He held the screaming infant. He looked into his eyes. He believed with every fiber of his being that this was the fulfillment. This was the promise. For 13 years, Abram raised Ishmael. 13 years of bonding. 13 years of teaching him the bow. 13 years of training him in the ways of the unseen God. 13 years of absolute certainty that this boy was the heir to the world. Abram loved Ishmael. Deeply, fiercely. When God finally spoke again, the words shattered Abram's reality. God declared the covenant would pass to a different son, a son not yet born. Abram's response was raw. It was visceral. Genesis 17:18 records his desperate plea. If only Ishmael might live under your blessing. God's answer split the world in two. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful. I will multiply him greatly. He will be the father of 12 rulers. I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac. 2 sentences, 2 destinies. One son received the blessing, prosperity, multiplication, earthly dominion. The other son received the covenant, the land, the lineage, the law, the ultimate Messiah. The blessing was vast, but the covenant was everything. This was not arbitrary. The Apostle Paul explains the terrifying logic in Galatians 4. Ishmael was the son born of the flesh. Isaac was the son born of the promise. Hagar and Sarai represented 2 covenants, one producing slavery, the other producing freedom. The child manufactured by human hands could never inherit the divine mandate. What was lawful in Mesopotamia was catastrophic in the economy of God. Abram tried to build a future with his own hands, and the structure he built would never stop cracking. One son held the blessing. One son held the blueprint to the earth. The collision was inevitable. Isaac was born. Abram was 100 years old. Sarai was 90. The biologically impossible occurred. The supernatural child arrived. The fractured household became a war zone. Genesis 21 marks the point of no return, the weaning feast of Isaac. The camp is celebrating, the wine flows, the meat is roasted. But in the shadows, Ishmael watches. He is a teenager now. He looks at the toddler, the usurper, the boy who stole his future. The text says Sarai saw Ishmael mocking Isaac. The Hebrew word is metzahek, It is a heavy, dark word. Ancient Jewish midrash suggests it was not mere teasing. It carried undertones of idolatry, of sexual immorality, or the threat of bloodshed. Ishmael was playing a deadly game. Sarai's reaction was explosive. She demanded Abram expel them, both of them, the mother and the son, cast them out permanently. The demand tore Abram apart. This was his firstborn, the boy he raised for 14 years, the boy he begged God to bless. Now, his wife demanded their death sentence. God spoke to Abram, "Listen to Sarai." The next morning, the sky was pale. Abram rose early. He loaded bread onto Hagar's shoulders. He handed her a single skin of water. He placed the boy beside her. He turned his back. He sent them away. Picture the horror of this moment. The Negev desert. Temperatures exceeding 45 degrees Celsius. Sand stretching to the jagged horizon. No shelter, no shade, no settlement for days of walking. A single skin of water for a woman and a growing boy. The sun beat down. The water ran out. The bread was eaten. The boy's body began to shut down. The dehydration thickened his blood. He collapsed. Hagar dragged him under a solitary, withered bush. She could not watch him die. She walked the distance of a bow shot away. She collapsed in the burning sand. And she wept. A guttural, tearing wail of a mother watching her child perish. Then heaven tore open. The angel of God called to her. "Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying. Lift him up. I will make him a great nation." God opened her eyes. A well of water appeared in the wasteland. The boy drank. The boy lived. But a profound theological shift had already occurred. Before Ishmael was even born, during her first flight, Hagar did something unprecedented. In Genesis 16:13, she gave God a name. She called him El Roi, the God who sees me. The rejected slave, the used surrogate, the discarded woman. She was the first human being in all of Scripture to name the Creator. God did not merely tolerate Hagar, He saw her. When the patriarchs looked right through her, God saw her. He saved her son. He promised her an empire. But the tragedy was sealed. The covenant had to go through Isaac. The wound of that separation was etched into the bedrock of the earth. It would never heal. Ishmael survived. He grew hard. He grew lethal. Genesis says God was with him. He lived in the wilderness of Paran. He became a master archer, a desert warlord. His mother brought him a wife from Egypt, tying his bloodline back to the empire of the pharaohs. From his loins came 12 sons, 12 princes. Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, Kedema. They became tribal chiefs. They became vast nations. They settled the sprawling eastern wilderness, from Havilah to Shur, right along the border of Egypt. They surrounded the Promised Land, a permanent, armed presence of the brother who was cast away. Time did not heal the wound. Time mutated it. 1 generation later, the fracture deepened. The covenant passed from Isaac to his son Jacob, but Isaac had twins, Jacob and Esau. Esau was the firstborn. The birthright was his. The ancient laws demanded it, but Esau was a man of the flesh. Genesis 25 reveals his fatal flaw. he sold his sacred birthright to Jacob for a single bowl of red stew. He despised his inheritance. Later, Jacob deceived their blind, dying father. He stole the patriarchal blessing. When Esau discovered the betrayal, he erupted. Genesis records a loud, bitter cry, a primal scream of a stolen destiny. "Bless me! Me too, my father!" But Isaac's hands shook. The blessing was gone. The vault was empty. Esau left with murder in his heart. He vowed to slaughter Jacob. And then he made a calculated geopolitical move, a decision that would curse the Middle East forever. Genesis 28:9 records the alliance. Esau walked into the desert. He went to the camp of Ishmael, and he married Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael. This was not romance. This was strategy. This was spite. The rejected twin merged his bloodline with the rejected firstborn. Two men who believed their birthrights were stolen. They united their families. They united their rage. They forged a permanent opposition force. Esau became the father of Edom. They settled the bleeding red rocks of Seir, modern-day southern Jordan. The hatred between Edom and Israel did not fade. It boiled. When Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, Edom blocked their path with swords. When Israel built its kingdom, Edom rebelled against every king. And when the Babylonian Empire finally breached Jerusalem in 586 BC, butchering the priests and burning the temple, the Edomites did not help. They stood on the surrounding hills, they watched the flames, and they cheered. The prophet Obadiah immortalized their treason. On the day you stood aloof while strangers carried off his wealth, you were like one of them. The wound Abram created was drawing real blood, but the family tree was even darker. Moab and Ammon, born of incest. The sons of Abram's nephew Lot and his own daughters after the fire rained on Sodom. They settled to the east. Modern-day Jordan. Look at the map. Look at the geography of hatred. Israel sits in the center, Edom to the south, Ishmael to the southeast, Moab and Ammon to the east, Philistia to the west. Every single border is a family wound. Every single neighbor is a rejected relative. The Promised Land was entirely besieged by the ghosts of Abram's broken family. Unresolved trauma became international foreign policy. These ancient wars were never about water. They were never about grazing rights. They were about inheritance. They were about who carried the mandate of heaven. It was a question human beings could never settle. The battle lines were drawn in blood. But the blood feud was about to evolve. It was about to mutate into something apocalyptic. A theological war for the soul of the earth. Fast forward, 2.5 millennia after Abram, the 7th century AD. The blazing sands of the Arabian Peninsula. A prophet named Muhammad rises. He founds a new faith, a faith that will swallow empires. Islam. Islam traces its spiritual ancestry directly back to Abraham, but not through Isaac, through Ishmael. This is the ultimate theological collision. In Islamic tradition, it was Ishmael, not Isaac, who was led up the mountain. It was Ishmael who was bound on the altar of sacrifice, the Kaaba in Mecca, the Black Cube, the holiest site in the Islamic world. Islamic tradition teaches it was built by Abraham and Ishmael together, a house of worship for the one true God. Every single year, millions of Muslims circle the Kaaba during the Hajj. They retrace the desperate footsteps of Hagar searching for water. They honor the firstborn son. This is not a cultural myth. This is a foundational, unshakable theological claim. It restructured the identity of a global civilization. Islam elevated the lineage of Ishmael. It crowned him the true heir, the rightful carrier of the covenant. The implications are terrifying. Two of the world's largest religions, Judaism and Islam, they trace their identity to the exact same Father. They revere the exact same God, and they both believe, with absolute, uncompromising certainty, that they hold the exclusive divine mandate to the exact same strip of land. Let us be clear. Not all modern Arabs are genetic descendants of Ishmael. The Arab world is vast. It encompasses ancient populations. Islam was born 2,500 years after Abram died. This is not a war of DNA. This is a war of spiritual identity, a war over the covenant. A border commission cannot solve this. A UN treaty cannot legislate this. History is nuanced. There were golden ages, in Al-Andalus, under the Ottomans. Jews and Muslims lived in coexistence that shamed Christian Europe. Jewish scholars thrived in Islamic courts, but the fault line never closed. It was always there, waiting beneath the tectonic plates of history, waiting for the right pressure. In 1948, the pressure broke the earth open. The modern state of Israel was established, on the very land both civilizations claimed by divine right. The ancient fracture erupted. The violence has not stopped for a single day since. And here, the Bible delivers a revelation so precise it should freeze the blood in your veins. Psalm 83, written 3,000 years ago, a desperate prayer by the psalmist Asaph. He describes a confederation of nations, a dark alliance forming a pact. Their objective is absolute annihilation. Come, let us destroy them as a nation, so that Israel's name is remembered no more. The psalmist lists the members of this apocalyptic coalition. Listen to the names. Listen to the ghosts of Genesis. Edom, the Ishmaelites. Moab, the Hagrites. Ammon, Amalek. Philistia, Assyria. Read the parchment. Edom, the descendants of Esau, the rejected twin. The Ishmaelites, the descendants of Ishmael, the rejected firstborn. Moab and Ammon, the descendants of Lot. The Hagrites, the people of Hagar, the expelled mother. Every single name on that 3,000-year-old hit list is a branch from Abram's shattered family tree. Every single name is an immediate neighbor of the Promised Land. This is not vague poetry. This is not symbolic prophecy. The Bible named the exact geopolitical coalition millennia before they organized into modern states. It maps flawlessly onto the reality surrounding Israel today. The Psalm 83 coalition is not a coincidence. It is a spiritual pattern. It has repeated across every era, from the Judges to the Babylonians to the modern rocket barrages of the 21st century. The world is trying to fix a broken covenant with a political band-aid. They are trying to negotiate with a 3,000-year-old prophecy. They will fail. The destruction is accelerating. The climax is here. The biblical text points toward only one resolution. It will not happen at a polished table in Geneva. It will not be drafted in New York. It will end exactly where it began, at the return of the Messiah to the bleeding city of Jerusalem. But there is a scene, a quiet, buried moment in the book of Genesis that almost no one sees. Genesis 25:9. Abram dies. He breathes his last. He is gathered to his people. And the text records something impossible. His sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him. Read the silence between those words. After decades of bitter separation, after the expulsion, after the burning desert, after the wound that split the earth in half, the two brothers came back together to bury their father. In the dust of the cave of Machpelah, they were not the patriarch of the Jews and the patriarch of the Arabs. They were not opposing warlords. They were just two grieving sons, standing over the cold body of the man who broke their family. Jewish scholars highlight a staggering detail. Isaac is named first, even though Ishmael was older. Ancient Midrash interprets this as a profound act of submission. Ishmael yielded. He accepted Isaac's place in the covenant. It was a silent, monumental reconciliation. In ancient Jewish tradition, the deeds of the fathers are prophetic signs for the children. This burial was not just history, it was a blueprint for the end of days. In our own time, the echo of that cave has sounded. In 2020, Arab nations, the UAE, Bahrain, signed historic peace treaties with Israel. They did not choose a political name. They called them the Abraham Accords. For the first time in modern history, diplomacy bypassed the politics. It invoked the blood. It invoked the common father. A public, startling admission that, despite 4,000 years of fire, the root is the same. But treaties will not stop the rockets. The war will not end until the sky splits open. Now, step back from the history. Step back from the geopolitics. Step back from the Middle East. Look at the mirror. Everything you just heard, the empires falling, the centuries of bloodshed, the Psalm 83 coalition, the Iron Dome intercepting fire in the night sky, all of it traces back to one moment, one tent, one man who could not wait for God. Abram was not a villain. He was not a monster. He was just tired. He was an old man waiting for a miracle that defied biology. He was surrounded by a culture that offered him a perfectly legal, perfectly logical shortcut. So, he took it. He forced God's hand. He manufactured a divine promise with human effort. 4,000 years later, the shrapnel of that single decision is still tearing through the streets of Jerusalem. I need to ask you a question, and I need you to face the silence right now. What is the Ishmael you are building? What promise has God made you that is taking so long you have decided to help him out? What are you forcing into existence with your own bare hands because you are exhausted from the waiting? Is it a relationship you know is toxic, but the fear of dying alone is louder than the voice of God? Is it a financial shortcut you are taking because the righteous path is too slow? Is it a career built on compromise? A foundation God never authorized, but you cannot stand the quiet any longer? Is it a decision you made 10 years ago, and you have been bleeding yourself dry ever since trying to make it work? Pouring your time, your money, your soul into a vessel God never breathed on. Look at the carnage of human effort. Look at the generational trauma. Look at the wars that never end. Look at the scorching sand of the Negev, where a mother waited for her son to die. Look at the red rocks of Edom, where cousins cheered as the temple burned. Look at the rockets streaking across the sky tonight. Abram's impatience did not just ruin his household, it redrew the borders of the earth. When you build what God did not command, you do not get a miracle. You get a war. A war you will fight for the rest of your life. A war your children will inherit. A war that compounds until it breaks you. But listen to the grace buried in the ash. God did not abandon Ishmael to the vultures. God saw Hagar. God heard the boy crying in the dirt. God opened her eyes to the water. God blessed the son of human effort, even as he guarded the covenant for the son of promise. His mercy is wide enough to cover your catastrophic mistakes. But his covenant still demands surrender. It still requires the breaking of your will. It still requires waiting in the dark. Drop Ishmael. Whatever you are manufacturing in God's name, whatever you are forcing, release it. Let it die in the desert. Trust the agonizing timing of Isaac. The miracle is coming, but it will arrive on heaven's clock, not yours. And when it comes, it will carry a weight of glory no human hands could ever forge. Abram could not wait one night. The world is still bleeding for it. If you are exhausted, if you are tired of forcing God's hand, if you are carrying the weight of an Ishmael you built yourself, I want you to drop a comment below. Tell your story. Expose the shortcut. You are not alone in the desert. Subscribe to the channel. Share this warning with someone who is tired of waiting. The fire is coming. Make sure you are holding the promise. I will see you in the next one.